The air in the hospital room, a sterile cocktail of antiseptic and forced hope, was supposed to be the backdrop for their victory. Liam sat in the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his body a roadmap of exhaustion, and watched his wife Chloe sleep. The doctor's words from an hour earlier still echoed in his mind, a triumphant symphony. The scans are clear. The treatment worked. She's in remission. Remission, the most beautiful word in the English language. For 18 months, their lives had been a brutalist landscape of appointments, chemotherapy infusions, fear, and the metallic taste of sickness that seemed to permeate everything. He had been her rock, her nurse, her chef, her chauffeur, her memory when the chemo fog descended. He had put his life, his architectural firm, his own dreams, on an indefinite hold, and he had done so without a moment's hesitation. This was the finish line. Chloe's eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes, still hollowed from the fight, but now holding a new light, found his. A weak smile touched her lips. He leaned forward, taking her hand. It felt frail, a bird's wing in his larger, calloused palm. "We did it," he whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears of relief. "You were so strong." She squeezed his hand, a flicker of her old strength returning. She drew him closer, her breath warm against his ear. He closed his eyes, ready to receive a whispered declaration of love, a promise of their new beginning, a shared acknowledgement of the hell they had just walked through together. Instead, she whispered 6 words that shattered the triumphant symphony and replaced it with a deafening silence. "It was never about love, Liam." A pause, then the final, devastating blow. "It was about security." He pulled back slowly, the motion feeling disconnected from his body, as if he were watching a scene in a movie. Her face was calm, her expression unreadable. He had thought this was the end of their war with cancer. He was wrong. It was the beginning of a war for his soul, and it was a war he, to her profound and catastrophic ignorance, had been preparing to win for years. Before we dive into this story of betrayal and the quiet, unshakable power of integrity, I want to connect with you. Have you ever poured your entire heart into something, only to discover the foundation was a lie? It's a feeling that can break you, or it can forge you into something stronger. Let me know in the comments below where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you believe in the idea that true worth isn't about what you have, but who you are, then please like this video and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The flashback was not a gentle drift into memory. It was a violent lurch, pulling Liam back to the day Chloe had received her diagnosis. They were in a different, sterile room that day, a doctor's office with tasteful but soulless art on the walls. The words, "malignant neoplasm," had landed in the space between them like a physical object, dense and cold. Chloe had crumpled, not into tears, but into a state of silent, rigid shock. Liam, feeling the floor drop out from under him, had done the only thing he could. He became a wall. He stood between her and the abyss. He asked the questions. He wrote down the terrifying polysyllabic names of drugs. He scheduled the consultations. In the car on the way home, as Chloe stared blankly out the window at a world that had suddenly become alien, he had taken her hand and said, "Whatever it takes, we will get through this. You will get through this." He meant it with every fiber of his being. At the time, he was a moderately successful architect. His small, boutique firm, Bedrock Designs, was his passion. He specialized in creating spaces that integrated with their natural surroundings, buildings that felt like they grew from the earth rather than being imposed upon it. He had a growing reputation for genius, but genius doesn't always translate to immediate, spectacular wealth. He made a good living, a comfortable living, but it was nothing compared to the generational wealth of Chloe's family, the Prestons. They had never let him forget it. When he and Chloe had announced their engagement 5 years prior, her father, Richard Preston, a titan of commercial real estate with a handshake like a closing vice, had taken him aside. Chloe is used to a certain lifestyle, Liam, he'd said, his voice a low rumble of condescension. I trust you understand the expectations. The implication was clear. You are not enough. Liam had merely smiled, a calm, steady smile that seemed to unnerve the older man. I intend to make your daughter very happy, Richard, was all he had said. Now, with the diagnosis, the Prestons' condescension curdled into a kind of pitying disdain. They saw Liam's devotion not as an act of love, but as the duty of a man who had married above his station. Her mother, Eleanor, would sweep into their tastefully modest home, trailing a cloud of expensive perfume, carrying not groceries or practical items, but frivolous gifts from luxury department stores. A silk scarf for a woman who had lost her hair, a gift certificate for a spa she was too sick to visit. Eleanor would survey the home Liam kept impeccably clean, the meals he prepared with meticulous attention to Chloe's dietary needs, and offer a tight, patronizing smile. It's just wonderful that you have so much free time to take care of all this, Liam. A blessing in disguise for your little business, I suppose. Every word was a perfectly polished stone thrown at his dignity. Liam would just nod, thank her for the useless gift, and continue measuring out Chloe's medication. Her brother Mark was cruder. A man who wore his inheritance like a suit of armor, Mark treated Liam with open contempt. He clapped Liam on the shoulder a little too hard. Holding down the fort, eh, Liam? Good man. Someone's got to play nursemaid. During one particularly grueling week, when Chloe was hospitalized with a neutropenic fever, Liam had been at her side for 72 hours straight, sleeping in fits and starts in the visitor's chair. Mark arrived for a 10-minute visit, looked at Liam's unshaven face and rumpled clothes, and scoffed. You look like hell, man. You should really try to keep yourself together. It can't be good for Chloe to see you looking so defeated. The irony was so thick it was suffocating. Liam was fighting, Mark was spectating. Yet in the Preston family's inverted reality, Liam was the one who was failing. Through it all, Liam maintained a preternatural calm. He absorbed the insults, the slights, the constant, grinding humiliation. He never snapped. He never defended himself. He simply focused on Chloe. He read to her when she couldn't focus on the words. He learned to mix smoothies that she could keep down. He held the basin for her when she was violently ill, stroking her hair and whispering, "It's okay. Let it out. I'm right here." He became an expert in her illness, a fluent speaker in the language of oncology. In those moments, with just the two of them in the quiet of the night, she would look at him, her eyes swimming with a mixture of pain and what he believed was profound gratitude. "I don't know what I would do without you, Liam," she would murmur, and he would reply, "You'll never have to find out." He believed it was a covenant. He didn't realize it was just a contract, and the fine print was about to come due. In his worn leather briefcase, which he carried everywhere, was a portfolio. To anyone who glanced at it, it looked like it held architectural drawings. It did not. It held the truth, a truth he had kept silent, a weight he carried as patiently as he carried the burden of Chloe's care. It was his insurance, not for his finances, but for his very soul. The weeks following Chloe's whisper in the hospital were a study in surrealism. The world celebrated her recovery, while Liam's inner world lay in ruins. He played the part of the relieved husband, smiling at the well-wishers, accepting the congratulatory handshakes, but inside, a quiet, cold mechanism had engaged. The whisper hadn't just broken his heart, it had activated a protocol he had long ago designed, but hoped never to execute. He watched Chloe now with a new, terrifying clarity. It was like a filter had been removed from his vision, and he could suddenly see the intricate wiring of her motivations, the cold calculus that had always been hidden beneath the veneer of affection. Her gratitude, which had seemed so profound in the depths of her illness, now revealed itself as relief. Not relief that she would get her life back with him, but relief that her security had been preserved. As her physical strength returned, A subtle but distinct chill entered their interactions. The easy intimacy they had once shared, or that he thought they had shared, evaporated. Her touch was fleeting, her smiles were for public consumption, and her conversations with him became logistical. Did you cancel the meal delivery service? We need to send thank you notes to the Hendersons. There was no, how are you, Liam? How are you holding up after all that? He had been the primary caregiver in a trauma, but his trauma was invisible, unacknowledged. He was a piece of scaffolding, essential for the construction, but now that the building was stable, he was being prepared for dismantling. The Prestons' behavior predictably amplified Chloe's. They saw her remission not as a shared victory, but as her personal liberation from the dreary, sick-room life she had been forced to endure. A life with him. A celebratory dinner was arranged at the Preston family estate, a palatial home that always made Liam feel like he should be using the service entrance. The house was a monument to Richard Preston's ego, all gleaming marble, soaring ceilings, and art that was expensive but communicated nothing. Liam stood in the grand foyer, a glass of champagne in his hand that he had no intention of drinking, feeling like a ghost at the feast. Richard clapped him on the back, the gesture lacking any real warmth. Well, Liam, you did your part. We're all very grateful. The phrase, you did your part, landed like a dismissal. The kind of thing one says to a hired hand whose contract has ended. Eleanor floated by, her smile as brittle as spun sugar. Chloe is looking radiant, isn't she? She's a Preston. We're fighters. It's in our blood. The implication was that her survival had everything to do with her lineage and nothing to do with the man who had held her hand through every agonizing moment. The toast came, delivered by Richard. He raised his crystal flute. To Chloe, to her strength, her resilience, and to getting her life back on track. Everyone cheered. They drank to Chloe. They drank to the doctors. They drank to Preston blood. Not a single person looked at Liam. His 18 months of sacrifice, of sleepless nights, of gut-wrenching fear, had been completely and utterly erased from the official history of her survival. After the toast, Richard cornered him near the oversized fireplace. He adopted a conspiratorial, man-to-man tone that was somehow more insulting than his usual condescension. Listen, Liam, he began, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Now that Chloe is on the mend, she's going to want to spread her wings again, get back to her old life. And you, well, your little firm has been on ice for a long time. It's going to be tough to get that going again. Liam waited, his expression neutral. He knew this was a preamble to an insult dressed as an offer. I've been thinking, Richard continued, I might have a spot for you at Preston Properties. Assistant project manager on the new mall development. It's a step up security-wise, a steady paycheck. It would take some of the pressure off Chloe. The offer was a masterpiece of humiliation. Assistant project manager. It was a junior role, a position for someone fresh out of college. He was offering it to a man who had designed award-winning buildings, a man whose professional opinion Richard himself had secretly sought out on a complex structural issue years ago, a fact Richard had conveniently forgotten. He was offering Liam a golden cage, a way to keep him employed, solvent, and subordinate, to keep him in his place. Liam looked at his father-in-law, at the smug certainty in his eyes, the belief that he was offering a drowning man a life raft. The old Liam, the one from before the whisper, might have been angered, hurt. The new Liam felt nothing but a profound, almost serene sense of clarity. He saw the chessboard. He saw every move, past, present, and future. That's a very generous offer, Richard, Liam said, his voice level and calm. But I have my own plans for my firm. I'll be fine. Richard's face tightened. He was not used to being refused, especially by someone he considered a subordinate. Your own plans? He scoffed. Don't be a fool, Liam. Pride doesn't pay the bills. No, Liam replied, a ghost of a smile on his lips. It doesn't, but other things do. He set his untouched champagne on a passing tray and walked away, leaving Richard Preston staring after him, a flicker of confusion disturbing his ironclad arrogance. In his car, before driving home, Liam opened his briefcase. He pulled out the portfolio and made a phone call. "Sarah, it's Liam," he said. "It's time. Execute the plan." The weeks that followed the disastrous celebratory dinner were a masterclass in passive aggression, a cold war fought in the quiet, beautifully decorated spaces of their shared home. Chloe, now fully immersed in her old life, treated Liam like a roommate, a remnant of a past she was eager to shed. She filled her days with lunches with friends, shopping trips, and planning sessions for charity galas. She spoke of the future, but her future was a single-person narrative. "I'm thinking of redecorating the guest room," she'd say, or, "I need a whole new wardrobe for the spring season." The word "we" had been surgically removed from her vocabulary. Liam, in turn, became an observer in his own life. He watched her move through the house he had so carefully maintained, a house where every corner held a memory of his devotion, and he felt a growing, chilling detachment. The love he had felt for her, a vast and seemingly unshakable continent, had eroded, leaving behind only a barren, rocky island of memory. His own days became quietly, intensely busy. He told Chloe he was reestablishing his firm, and she accepted this with a dismissive nod, imagining him making cold calls and struggling to find minor renovation projects. The reality was starkly different. His phone calls were not to potential clients, but to a tight, fiercely loyal team he had maintained for years. His meetings were not in coffee shops, but in the discreet, wood-paneled offices of his financial advisor, Sarah Jenkins. Sarah was a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a mind that moved like a predator. She had been with Liam since the beginning, since before Chloe, since the monumental event he had never spoken of to the Prestons. Years ago, Liam hadn't just had a small architectural firm. He had co-founded a revolutionary software company that created a BIM, Building Information Modeling, platform that changed the way large-scale construction projects were managed. They sold the company to a tech giant for a nine-figure sum. Liam's half, managed shrewdly by Sarah, had grown into a formidable fortune. He had stepped away from the tech world, weary of its relentless pace, to pursue his true passion, architecture. He lived modestly, not out of necessity, but out of choice. He believed that a man's worth was in his work and his character, not the size of his bank account. Meeting Chloe, he had seen a woman he thought shared his values, a woman who seemed to love him for who he was, not what he had. He had intentionally kept his wealth a secret, a test of that love. A test she had now, in the most spectacular fashion, failed. The Preston Properties portfolio is heavily leveraged, as you predicted, Sarah said during one of their meetings, sliding a folder across the polished mahogany table. Richard expanded too aggressively before the last market downturn. He's carrying an enormous amount of debt, and it's all consolidated with one commercial bank, Sterling National. Liam opened the folder. Inside were charts, figures, and legal documents that told a story of profound arrogance and financial vulnerability. "And Sterling National?" Liam asked, though he already knew the answer. "Their commercial loan division was acquired 6 months ago," Sarah said with a thin, satisfied smile, "by a holding company, a private equity firm called Northbridge Capital." "And who owns Northbridge Capital?" Liam asked, his voice quiet. "You do, Liam," she confirmed. 100%. We acquired it through a series of shell corporations. As of last Tuesday, you are, for all intents and purposes, Richard Preston's bank. Liam stared at the documents. This was the plan he had set in motion over a year ago, long before Chloe's diagnosis. It had started as a defensive measure. He had seen the way Richard operated, the casual cruelty, the dismissiveness. He had a premonition that his father-in-law's arrogance would one day become a direct threat. He'd tasked Sarah with a simple mission: find Richard's weakness and acquire leverage. It was an insurance policy. When Chloe got sick, he had put the entire plan on hold, instructing Sarah to simply monitor the situation. He had poured all his energy into love, into healing. But Chloe's whisper had changed everything. The insurance policy was no longer for defense, it was for justice. He treats people like they are assets to be leveraged or liabilities to be discarded, Liam said, more to himself than to Sarah. He sees my love for his daughter as a liability, her illness as an inconvenience, my career as a failure. He can't see the person, he only sees the balance sheet. So what is the new balance sheet going to look like? Sarah asked, her tone all business. Liam leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. He thought of the endless nights by Chloe's bedside. He thought of the patronizing smiles of his mother-in-law. He thought of Mark's sneering insults. He thought of Richard's offer of a pity job. And he thought of Chloe, whispering away their entire life together for the cold comfort of security. The anger was there, a cold, dense star in his chest. But it was orbited by something else, a profound sense of sorrow. He had not wanted this. He had wanted the love to be real. But it wasn't. And when a structure's foundation is rotten, you don't patch the walls. You tear it down and build something new, something true. The balance sheet, Liam said, his voice hard as steel, is going to be balanced. It's time to call the loan. The quiet before the storm lasted another 2 weeks. Liam moved through his days with a deliberate, almost unnerving calm. He was meticulously polite to Chloe, who seemed to mistake his detachment for resignation. She saw a man who was defeated, who was slowly accepting the inevitable end of their marriage. She had no idea she was watching a master strategist position his final pieces on the board. The tension in their home was a palpable thing, a low hum that vibrated beneath the surface of their sterile interactions. It was in the way they passed in the hallway without making eye contact, the way his fork and knife clicked against his plate in the otherwise silent dining room, the way the space between them in their king-size bed felt like a vast, frozen chasm. During this time, Liam did something he hadn't done in nearly 2 years. He returned to his office. The space was thick with the dust of neglect, a thin gray film covering his drafting table, his books, his architectural models. It was a tomb of his suspended dreams. He spent a full day just cleaning, wiping away the physical manifestation of his hiatus. As he cleaned, he wasn't just restoring the room, he was restoring himself. He ran his hands over the smooth, cool wood of a model for a community library he had designed, a project that had been his passion before Chloe's illness. He felt the familiar spark, the creative fire that had been banked for so long. This was who he was, a builder, a creator, not a nursemaid, not a subordinate, not a victim. Meanwhile, the Preston family was moving forward with their own plans. Chloe, emboldened by her recovery and her family's unwavering support, finally approached him one evening. She stood in the doorway of his study, her arms crossed, a look of rehearsed resolution on her face. "Liam, we need to talk," she said, the 4 most dreaded words in a failing marriage. Liam looked up from a book on urban planning, his expression calm. "All right, Chloe, let's talk." She walked in, but she didn't sit. She remained standing, a subtle power play. "This isn't working," she said, the words coming out flat and practiced. "We've grown apart. The illness, it changed things. It changed me." "I see," Liam said, his voice betraying no emotion. He simply watched her, letting the silence stretch. It unnerved her. She had expected pleading or anger or sadness. She was not prepared for this quiet, analytical gaze. "I think," she continued, faltering slightly, "that it's best if we separate. I've spoken to my father, and he's had his lawyer draw up some papers. It's very generous, It will help you get back on your feet. Generous. The word was a slap in the face. She was offering him a severance package for his love, a pittance to dismiss 18 months of his life. He felt a flash of heat, the cold star of his anger flaring, but he immediately suppressed it. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. "The papers," he said. "Where are they?" "My father has them," she replied, a hint of her old confidence returning. She was on familiar ground now, legalities, finances, the language of her family. "He wants to have a meeting, all of us, at the house, on Saturday, to finalize things, to keep it civilized." Civilized. A civilized execution. Liam almost smiled. "Saturday," he repeated, "at your father's house. I'll be there." Satisfied, Chloe turned and left, leaving him alone in the quiet of his study. He looked down at the book in his hands, but he didn't see the words. He saw the grand, marble-floored foyer of the Preston estate. He saw the smug, confident faces of Richard, Eleanor, and Mark. He saw Chloe standing with them, a united front against the inconvenient husband. He closed the book softly. The quiet was over. The storm was about to break. Saturday arrived, a cool, crisp autumn day. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a beautiful canvas for the ugliness that was about to unfold. Liam dressed carefully, choosing a simple, well-tailored dark gray suit, a white shirt, and no tie. It was the uniform of a man who was there for business, not for a family drama. He drove to the Preston estate, the familiar route feeling different this time. It was not the path to his humiliation, but the path to his vindication. As he pulled his modest but elegant sedan up the long, winding driveway, he felt a strange sense of peace. The anxiety and hurt that had churned within him for months had settled into a solid core of resolve. He was no longer a participant in their play. He was the new director, about to rewrite the final act. He walked up the stone steps and rang the bell. The heavy oak door was opened by Mark, who looked him up and down with a smirk. "Look what the cat dragged in," Mark sneered. "Ready for your judgment day, Liam?" Liam met his gaze without flinching. "Something like that, Mark," he said, his voice even. He stepped past him into the foyer, where the rest of the family was assembled. Richard, Eleanor, and Chloe stood together like a tribunal. On a polished mahogany table between them, in an empty chair, sat a single, ominous-looking, leather-bound folder. The divorce papers. The generous offer. Richard Preston stepped forward, his face a mask of magnanimity. He was playing the part of the benevolent patriarch, forced to perform an unpleasant but necessary duty. "Liam, thank you for coming. We all agree this is the most dignified way to handle things." "Dignity is important," Liam agreed, his eyes sweeping over the three of them. He did not take the offered seat. He remained standing, creating an unexpected equilibrium in the room. He was not the supplicant they had expected. Eleanor spoke next, her voice dripping with condescending sympathy. "We just want what's best for Chloe, you understand. She needs a fresh start, a clean break from all the sickness and difficulty." Every word was a carefully chosen barb, designed to remind him of his role as the caretaker of her illness, a role they were now officially terminating. Chloe herself remained silent, her expression a mixture of guilt and steely resolve. She couldn't quite meet his eye. She looked at a point just over his shoulder, as if he were already a ghost. "All right," Richard said, his patience wearing thin at Liam's silence. He tapped the folder on the table. "Let's get to it. Our lawyer has drafted a separation agreement. In it, we've outlined the division of assets. We are prepared to offer you a one-time payment of $250,000. We feel this is more than fair, considering your employment situation. It will be a nice cushion for you while you get your business going again." He said the number as if he were bestowing a great gift. $250,000. It was a fraction of what Liam had poured into their shared life, a rounding error in the Preston family finances. It was an insult, calculated to put him firmly in his place, to quantify his worth and find it wanting. Liam looked at the folder. He looked at Richard's smug face. He looked at Eleanor's practiced pity. He looked at Mark's triumphant sneer. And then his eyes finally settled on Chloe. He saw her give a slight, almost imperceptible nod, confirming her approval of this final, crushing humiliation. The peace within him solidified into something harder. It was time. "No," Liam said. The word was not loud, but it landed in the cavernous foyer with the force of a wrecking ball. The single word hung in the air, vibrating with an authority the Prestons had never heard from him before. Richard's magnanimous expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. "No," he repeated, as if Liam had misspoken. "What do you mean, no? This is an extremely generous offer." "It's not an offer, Richard," Liam said, his voice still quiet, yet carrying to every corner of the marble hall. "It's an insult, and I'm not here to be insulted." He took a step forward, and for the first time he saw a sliver of uncertainty in their eyes. They had expected a broken man, a grateful man, or perhaps a weeping man. They had not expected this calm, unyielding stranger. Mark, ever the brute, stepped forward. "Listen, pal, you don't get to make demands here. You're in no position to negotiate. Take the deal or leave with nothing." Liam turned his head slowly to look at Mark. "Position," he mused, as if tasting the word. "It's funny you should talk about position, Mark. You've never had to earn one in your life. Your entire existence is a trust fund, a corner office you didn't earn, and a sense of entitlement as vast and empty as this house." Mark's face turned a blotchy red. "Why you?" he started, taking a step forward, but Richard put a hand on his son's chest. "Enough, Mark." Richard's eyes were now cold, the benevolent mask completely gone. "If you're not here to sign the papers, Liam, then you're wasting our time. State your business or get out." "Oh, I am here to state my business," Liam said. He walked past the table with the divorce papers, ignoring it completely, and stood directly in the center of their little group. He was no longer on the periphery. He was the focus. "I'm here to talk about all the things we never talk about." He began to speak, his voice a calm, measured cadence. It was the list of grievances, delivered not with heat, but with the chilling precision of a surgeon's scalpel. "I'm here to talk about the 18 months I spent watching my wife wither away while her mother brought her silk scarves and judged the cleanliness of my floors. Thank you for that, Eleanor. Your concern was truly touching." Eleanor flinched as if struck. "I'm here to talk about the nights I spent holding a basin while Chloe vomited up her insides, while her brother Mark was out closing bars, only to show up for 10 minutes the next day to tell me I looked defeated. Thank you for your support, Mark. It was a pillar of strength." Mark looked away, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Liam's gaze then fell on Richard. "And I'm here to talk about the man who watched me sacrifice my career, my time, my entire life, and then as a reward for my devotion, offered me a pity job as an assistant project manager. A job you knew was an insult. You wanted to see me crawl, didn't you, Richard? You wanted to finally, definitively prove that I was beneath you." Richard's face was like granite. "This is pointless melodrama." "Is it?" Liam's voice dropped even lower, becoming more intense. "I don't think so. I think it's a context." Finally, he turned to Chloe. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. This was not the script she had rehearsed. "And you, Chloe," he said, and for the first time, a note of genuine pain entered his voice. "I held your hand through every needle, every scan, every moment of terror. I put my soul on hold for you. And when you finally came through the fire, you leaned over and you whispered to me that it was never about love. It was about security." He let the words hang in the air, an indictment that echoed louder than any shout. "You thought I was your security policy, a safe, stable, devoted man who would manage your life while you recovered. and whom you could then discard when he was no longer useful. Chloe finally spoke, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. Liam, that's not... You're twisting things. Am I? He asked, taking a step closer. Then untwist them, Chloe. Tell me what you meant. Tell me you love me. Tell me you respect me. Tell me you see me as an equal partner. He waited. Chloe opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked to her father, her default source of strength, but Richard was staring at Liam with a new, dawning horror. They all were. They were seeing him for the first time. The quiet, unassuming architect was gone. In his place stood someone they did not recognize, someone with a spine of forged steel. I thought so, Liam said into the crushing silence. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out his own folder. It was slim, black, and infinitely more menacing than the one on the table. You wanted to talk about security, Richard. So let's talk about security. Let's talk about Sterling National Bank. The name of the bank landed in the room and detonated. Richard Preston's face, which had been a mask of cold anger, instantly blanched. Sterling National was not just his bank. It was his financial lifeblood. Every project, every property, every bit of his leveraged empire was tied to the massive line of credit he held with them. What about them? Richard managed to say, his voice suddenly hoarse. Liam opened his folder. He didn't show it to them yet. He simply looked down at the top page, as if reviewing his notes. I've been following your business for some time, Richard. It's a fascinating case study in over-leveraged expansion. You bet big, and for a while, it paid off. But you're spread thin, dangerously thin. Your entire net worth is basically a house of cards, balanced on the goodwill of your primary lender. This is none of your business, Richard snarled, but the bravado was gone, replaced by a raw, naked fear. Oh, but that's where you're wrong, Liam said, his voice taking on a sharp, clinical edge. It became my business about 6 months ago. You see, Sterling National's commercial debt division was sold. It was acquired by a private equity firm, a rather discreet one. It's called Northbridge Capital. He paused, letting the name sink in. He looked from Richard's panicked face to Chloe's utter confusion. Northbridge Capital, Liam continued, now holds the note on every single one of your properties, Richard. They own your debt, all of it. He let another silence stretch, enjoying the exquisite torture of their incomprehension. Richard was now breathing heavily, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. He understood the implications. If Northbridge decided to call in his loans, or even just refuse to extend his credit line, he would be ruined. Utterly and completely. Who are they? Richard whispered, the question full of dread. Liam finally lifted his gaze from the folder and locked eyes with his father-in-law. He allowed a small, cold smile to touch his lips. I was so busy taking care of Chloe, I had to put my architectural work on hold, he said, circling back to their own words, turning them into a weapon. But as you so helpfully pointed out, pride doesn't pay the bills, so I had to rely on my other assets. He then delivered the final, devastating revelation. I am Northbridge Capital. I own your debt, Richard, every last dollar, which means for all intents and purposes, I own you. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a universe collapsing. Chloe stared at him, her mouth slightly agape, her mind refusing to process the information. Eleanor looked back and forth between Liam and her husband, her face a mask of horrified confusion. Mark was frozen, his earlier bravado completely deflated, looking like a little boy who had just seen a ghost. But Richard understood completely. The blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly gray. The titan of real estate, the man who moved markets and crushed competitors, was staring at the man he had dismissed as a penniless nobody and seeing his destroyer. You, Richard stammered, the word barely a croak. How? You were right about one thing, Richard, Liam said, his voice devoid of any triumph, filled only with a chilling finality. It is all about security. You just made a fatal error in assessing who had it and who didn't. You looked at my simple car, my modest house, my quiet life, and you saw weakness. You saw failure. You never once thought to ask what I did before I became an architect. You never thought to look beyond the surface. He took a single sheet of paper from his folder and slid it onto the mahogany table, right next to their pathetic divorce agreement. It was a summary of the debt portfolio. Richard's entire empire quantified in black and white with the name Northbridge Capital, Liam Jansen, sole proprietor, at the bottom. The document was a death certificate for the Preston dynasty. Now, Liam said, his voice resonating with the power they had so foolishly ignored for years, let's talk about the new terms of this separation. The immediate aftermath of the revelation was a tableau of disintegration. Richard Preston, the patriarch, the titan, physically sagged. The arrogant posture that had defined him for decades dissolved, and he sank into the chair that had been intended for Liam. He stared at the single sheet of paper on the table as if it were a venomous snake. His empire, his legacy, the very source of his identity, was held in the hands of the son-in-law he had so thoroughly despised. Eleanor rushed to her husband's side, her face a mess of fear and disbelief. "Richard, what does this mean? What is he talking about?" she pleaded, her voice high and thin. Richard didn't answer. He couldn't. He was a king who had just discovered his throne was made of dust. Mark, for his part, seemed to shrink. The physical bulk that he used to intimidate others now looked like clumsy, useless mass. He looked at Liam, then at his father, his brain struggling to reconcile the world he knew with this new, terrifying reality. The man he had mocked as a nursemaid held the power of financial life and death over his entire family. But Liam's focus was on Chloe. She stood frozen, her eyes locked on his. The whisper in the hospital room, her cold dismissal of their life together, her casual cruelty, it all replayed in her mind, now cast in a horrifying new light. She had traded a diamond for a stone, and she hadn't even realized it. She had sought security, and in her blindness she had discarded the most secure man she had ever known in favor of a fragile illusion of inherited wealth. "Liam," she whispered, her voice trembling, I didn't know." "That," Liam replied, his voice cutting through the silent chaos, "is the single most honest thing you've said to me in years. You didn't know. You didn't care to know. You judged me on a set of criteria so shallow, so utterly meaningless, that you never even saw the man standing in front of you." He gestured to the divorce papers on the table. "You were going to give me $250,000 to get back on my feet. A severance package for my love." He then looked directly at Richard. "My lawyers have reviewed your financial situation. Calling in the full debt would trigger an immediate collapse. Bankruptcy, foreclosures, total liquidation. You would lose everything. This house, the company, the cars, everything." Eleanor let out a small, strangled gasp. "You can't," she whispered. "You wouldn't." "Wouldn't I?" Liam asked, his gaze sweeping over them. "You were prepared to throw me out with nothing but pocket change after I devoted nearly 2 years of my life to saving your daughter. You dismissed my sacrifice, insulted my profession, and attacked my dignity at every turn. Give me one good reason why I should show you a mercy you were never willing to show me." No one spoke. There was no reason. They had been caught, red-handed, by their own arrogance. The moral mirror he held up to them was flawless, and the reflection was hideous. But Liam was not a cruel man. Vengeance was not his goal. Justice was. "I am not going to destroy you, Richard," he said, and a collective shuddering sigh of relief went through the room. "But I am going to change things drastically." He laid out his terms, his voice calm and resolute, the voice of a CEO dictating policy. First, the divorce. We will proceed, Chloe, but on my terms. The insulting offer on the table is void. Instead, you will receive a settlement of $5 million. Chloe stared at him, stunned. It was 20 times what she had offered him. It was a fortune, but she knew, in that moment, it was also a final, damning statement. It was a transactional sum for a transactional love. He was paying her for her time, and in doing so, erasing any claim she had to the deeper, more meaningful life they might have had. Second, he continued, turning back to Richard, I will not call in your debt. Instead, Northbridge Capital will assume a controlling interest in Preston Properties. I am, as of Monday morning, the new chairman of the board. You, Richard, will be given the title of President Emeritus, a figurehead position. You will have an office, a salary, and no power whatsoever. You will cede all operational control to me and the new board I will appoint. Richard looked up, his face ashen. It was a fate worse than bankruptcy. His company, his life's work, would be taken from him, and he would be forced to watch as the man he scorned ran it. You'll be a figurehead, Liam repeated, a living reminder of what happens when arrogance outstrips wisdom. And Mark? Eleanor squeaked, looking at her son. Liam's eyes fell on Mark, who flinched. Mark will be given a choice. He can accept a demotion to a regional manager position in a satellite office, a real job where his performance will be measured and he will be held accountable. Or he can resign. The choice is his. Finally, Liam's gaze returned to Chloe. You are free, Chloe. You have your health, and you will have your security. You can live the life you wanted, but it will not be with me. And you will never again have a claim to anything I build, create, or own. He placed his house key and his wedding ring on the table next to Richard's shattered empire. The small metallic clink was the sound of a final, irrevocable ending. My lawyers will be in touch on Monday to finalize the paperwork, he said to the room at large. I believe my business here is concluded. He turned and without a backward glance, walked out of the house, leaving the Preston family to drown in the ruins of their own making. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal and corporate maneuvering. Liam, with Sarah Jenkins by his side, moved with swift and decisive precision. The transfer of power at Preston Properties was a masterpiece of silent force. The announcement was made to the board and senior staff. Richard Preston was stepping into a well-deserved retirement as President Emeritus, and the company's primary creditor, Northbridge Capital, was taking an active role in leadership with its principal, Liam Jansen, as the new chairman. The story fed to the public was one of smooth transition and strategic partnership. Only a handful of people in the world knew the truth. It was a bloodless coup. Richard Preston was true to his word, a broken man. He appeared at the office, a ghost haunting the halls of his former kingdom. He sat in his new, smaller office with its meaningless title, a living testament to his own hubris. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a permanent, hollowed-out look of defeat. Employees who had once feared him now spoke to him with a kind of gentle pity, which was, for Richard, the cruelest punishment of all. Mark surprisingly took the demotion. He was sent to manage a portfolio of dreary commercial strip malls in a city 3 hours away. Stripped of his nepotistic armor, he was forced to actually work, to learn the business from the ground up. The first few reports that came back to the head office were abysmal, but then something shifted. The reports got better. There were whispers that Mark was, for the first time in his life, applying himself, that the humiliation had burned away his arrogance, leaving behind something salvageable. It was a flicker of hope, but Liam held no expectations. Redemption had to be earned, not gifted. As for Eleanor, her social world collapsed. The power of the Preston name had been predicated on Richard's dominance in the business world. With that dominance gone, the invitations dried up. Her friends, whose loyalty was as shallow as her own, distanced themselves. She was left in her marble mansion, a queen with no court, her primary role now being the caretaker of her broken husband. And Chloe, the $5 million was transferred to her account. She moved out of their shared home and into a luxury apartment downtown. She had the financial security she had so desperately craved. She could buy anything she wanted, the clothes, the cars, the jewelry. But she quickly discovered that money could not buy back what she had thrown away. Her friends, the same ones who had abandoned her mother, treated her with a new, transactional curiosity. She was the woman who had fumbled a fortune, the woman whose husband had turned out to be a secret king she had failed to recognize. They gossiped about her behind her back. The victory of her remission felt hollow, tainted by the spectacular failure of her judgment. Liam, for his part, did not look back. He poured his energy into transforming Preston properties. He found that Richard, in his arrogant expansion, had actually acquired some fundamentally sound assets, but they were being mismanaged, milked for short-term gain rather than developed for long-term value. Liam brought his architect's mind to the real estate world. He didn't just look at buildings as assets on a spreadsheet. He looked at them as spaces for people to live and work. He started a new initiative within the company, an urban renewal division. Its mission was to acquire neglected properties in struggling neighborhoods and redevelop them, not with sterile, gentrifying luxury condos, but with mixed-use buildings that included affordable housing, green spaces, and community centers. He brought his old passion from bedrock designs into this new, massive enterprise. He was building again, not just structures of steel and glass, but structures of community and hope. His days were long and filled with purpose. He worked with a renewed passion, the creative fire that had been dormant for so long, now roaring back to life. He was respected by his new employees, not because of his power, but because of his vision and his integrity. He treated everyone, from the janitors to the senior vice presidents, with a quiet dignity that the company had never known under Richard Preston. He was healing the toxic culture of the company just as he was healing himself. One evening, months later, a letter arrived at his office. It was from Chloe. He recognized her elegant handwriting on the envelope. He almost threw it away, but some lingering curiosity made him open it. The letter was not long. It was not a plea for reconciliation or a request for more money. It was an apology, a real one. "Liam," it began, "there are no words to undo what I did. I was a fool. I was raised to see the world in terms of price tags, and I put a price tag on you. I put a price tag on your love. It was the gravest mistake of my life. I see now what I lost. It wasn't the money. I have money. It was the one person who ever saw me, the real me, beneath all the Preston nonsense, and loved me not just in spite of it, but through it. I have my security, and I have never felt more insecure in my entire life. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I have no right. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. I see you now, Liam. I'm just sorry I didn't see you sooner." Liam read the letter twice. He felt a pang, not of love, but of a deep, sorrowful nostalgia for the man he used to be, the man who would have given anything for that love to be real. He folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and closed it. It was a part of his past, an important lesson learned, but it was not his future. He turned back to the blueprints spread across his desk. It was the design for a new public library, the centerpiece of one of his renewal projects. It was full of light, open spaces, and quiet corners for people to dream. He picked up his pencil and smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile. The foundation was sound, the structure was strong, and he was building again. A year passed. The story of Liam Jansen and Preston Properties became a quiet legend in the business community. The company, once a symbol of cutthroat real estate tactics, was now lauded for its innovative and ethical approach to urban development. Profits were up, but more importantly to Liam, The company was creating tangible good in the world. The Urban Renewal Division was a resounding success, transforming blighted city blocks into vibrant, thriving communities. Liam had found a way to merge his architectural genius with his financial power, creating a synergy that was both profitable and profoundly fulfilling. He rarely thought of the Prestons. They existed on the periphery of his life, a distant echo. He heard through the corporate grapevine that Richard remained a shell of his former self. Eleanor had devoted herself to charity work, a desperate, transparent attempt to buy back some social standing. Mark, in a twist no one could have predicted, had excelled in his remote position. He had proven to have a surprising knack for management when stripped of his father's influence. Liam had promoted him, twice. He was now a respected regional director, and the two men shared a professional, if distant, correspondence. They never spoke of the past. Liam's personal life had also found a new, quiet rhythm. He had sold the house he once shared with Chloe, the place that held so many ghosts of both love and betrayal. He moved into a penthouse apartment in one of his own redeveloped buildings, a space he designed himself. It was minimalist, full of light and natural materials, with a stunning view of the city he was helping to reshape. He was not dating. He was not looking for a relationship. He was content in his own company, in the purpose he had found in his work. His heart was not closed, but it was guarded, healing at its own pace. One afternoon, he was visiting the construction site of the new library. He stood on the unfinished second floor, looking out through the open framework at the city skyline. The sounds of construction, the whine of saws, the clang of steel were a kind of music to him. This was real. This was tangible. This was a legacy. "It's going to be beautiful," the voice came from behind him. He turned. It was Sarah Jenkins, his advisor, his confidant, his unexpected ally. She stood there in a hard hat, a warm smile on her face. "It already is," he replied, turning his gaze back to the view. "Just needs the walls." "You built something incredible out of the wreckage, Liam," she said, coming to stand beside him. "Not just here, at the company, with your life." "I had good advice," he said, glancing at her. "And a good architect knows you can't build on a rotten foundation. I just had to clear the site first." They stood in comfortable silence for a few moments, two people who understood the full story, the price that had been paid, and the victory that had been earned. Later that week, he received another piece of mail forwarded from his old address. It was a simple postcard. It showed a picture of a rugged, windswept coastline. On the back, in an unfamiliar, slightly shaky hand, was a short message. "I work in a small clinic here. I help people. It's not much, but it's mine. I am learning to be secure in myself. Thank you for the lesson. C." He looked at the postcard for a long time. There was no return address. It was not a plea. It was a statement, a report from a distant shore. She was on her own journey now, one he had inadvertently set her on. He hoped she would find what she was looking for. He felt a final, gentle release, the last anchor to his old life dissolving away. He was truly free. His victory was not in the Prestons' downfall, but in his own survival and renewal. He had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not become bitter or cruel. He had maintained his integrity, his dignity, and his focus on building a better world. He had transformed their poison into his own medicine. The true revenge was not their ruin, but his own quiet, magnificent success. He had proven that true worth is not in what others think of you or what you possess, but in the strength of your character and the value of your work. It was a lesson he had known all along, but one he had to walk through fire to fully understand. And so we come to the end of Liam's story, but it's also a beginning of a life built on a foundation of truth, integrity, and self-worth. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound betrayals can lead to our most authentic rebirth. The greatest strength isn't loud and arrogant. It's quiet, patient, and prepared. What did you take away from Liam's journey? Do you believe the Prestons, especially Chloe and Mark, deserve the second chances they were given? I truly want to know what you think, so please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Your insights make this community what it is. If this story resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of quiet strength and ultimate vindication, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that empower and inspire. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. Remember to be kind, be strong, and always, always know your own worth.